Rain hammered against the glass walls of the penthouse as she slipped inside, the city glittering far below like a field of diamonds drowning in fog. Her heart beat with the precision of the recorder hidden beneath her blouse. This was the night she'd finally unmask him, the billionaire who built his empire on charm and lies. Every shadow in the silent office seemed to breathe with secrets. The safe, tucked behind a painting of the ocean, whispered promises of truth. Her hands trembled as she spun the dial, her breath sensing with the slow click of each number. When the door opened, the sound was too soft for the storm outside, but loud enough to end everything she thought she knew. Inside, there were no documents, no evidence, only hundreds of envelopes, each sealed in navy wax, stacked like devotion itself. The top one bore her name in his handwriting, the same curve of letters she'd memorized long ago. The letter trembled in her hands as she read his words for the first time in years. Each sentence was a whisper from a man she had vowed to destroy. He wrote not as the billionaire adored by the press, but as the man who once traced promises along her skin beneath the scent of coffee and midnight rain. The letter spoke of guilt, his own, and of something hidden beneath the empire's polished surface. "If you're reading this," he wrote, "then the truth has already caught up to me." Every word cut through her resolve, and she hated that her chest ached at all. The recorder under her blouse still blinked red, still capturing the tremor in her breath. She had come for evidence. Instead, she found emotion dressed as confession. She leaned back, pressing the edge of the letter to her lips. How many nights had he written these words? How many times had she told herself she'd never care? The second envelope waited, its wax seal darker, heavier. Inside, he wrote about the day she left him, the scent of her perfume lingering on his cuff, the silence that followed her footsteps down the hall. He called it the quiet that built an empire. Her chest tightened as she imagined him alone, writing letters he never sent. But she shook her head, forcing the emotion away. Love was the perfect disguise for deceit. Still, a quiet, traitorous voice asked, "What if this wasn't deceit at all?" She pulled out another, this one dated 3 years ago. "I lied because I thought I could protect you," it read. "But lies have their own gravity." Her jaw tightened. That was the night she'd uncovered the first whispers of his financial scandal, the one that ruined her career. She'd spent every day since trying to prove he had destroyed her to save himself. Yet here, in black ink and trembling handwriting, he confessed something entirely different. He hadn't betrayed her. He'd taken the fall for something he couldn't name. And worse, he'd done it to keep her safe. By dawn, the rain had stopped, and the skyline burned with early light. The floor was covered in opened envelopes, the air heavy with ink and memory. Elena stood by the window, letter in hand, her reflection merging with the city below. For years she'd chased his downfall. Now she wasn't sure who had truly been chasing whom. Behind her, the recorder blinked its last light and died, leaving only silence. She looked at the safe again. Hundreds of letters left unread, and somewhere between guilt and truth, she realized, the story she thought she was writing wasn't about corruption. It was about him and her, and the one secret they'd both buried too deep to ever say aloud. The city stirred beneath the pale wash of morning. Elena sat amid the aftermath, letters splayed like ghosts across the floor. Her recorder was dead, but her resolve flickered alive. Every line of Adrian's writing cut through her certainty. The man she'd come to expose might have been her protector all along. Yet, the part that haunted her wasn't his guilt. It was his love. He wrote as though each page were a conversation they never finished. One letter mentioned a date, a warehouse on the East Docks, and a promise. "If you ever find these words, go there. You'll know." She hated how her pulse quickened. She should have left the moment she found them, But as sunlight spilled across the ink, she realized the investigation had turned. Now it wasn't about proving him corrupt. It was about finding out why he'd saved her in the first place. By noon, the streets steamed from the night's rain. Elena moved through the city like a ghost, her coat pulled tight against the wind. She had spent years dissecting his empire, chasing the pieces of his deceit. And yet now, every memory fought against the image she'd built. At the docks, the air was heavy with salt and rust. A single door waited at the end of an abandoned pier, marked with the same seal she'd seen on the envelopes. She hesitated, fingers grazing the handle. Every instinct screamed to walk away, but she remembered his words. "If you ever find these words, go there. You'll know." She pushed it open, and the light swallowed her whole. The air inside the warehouse smelled of dust and forgotten time. Old light filtered through fractured skylights, streaking across rows of crates and tarps. Then she saw it, a table in the center, and on it, a projector flickering to life. A film reel spun, casting a trembling image on the wall. It was him, Adrian, recorded years ago. His voice was softer than she remembered. "If you're watching this," he said, "then you never believed me. But I couldn't let you destroy yourself chasing the wrong ghost." The words struck like glass. Behind him in the footage stood a man she didn't recognize. Someone she thought long dead. Her entire narrative shattered in a heartbeat. She replayed the film 3 times before she could breathe. Marcus Harlan, the man she'd accused Adrian of killing, was alive. And if he was, everything about her career-ending expose had been a lie. Her body felt weightless, her world disassembled in silence. In the final seconds of the footage, Adrian looked directly into the camera. "If you ever find the truth," he said, "you'll understand why I disappeared." Then static swallowed the frame. The tape ended. She stood in darkness, her reflection trembling on the blank wall, and whispered, "What did you do, Adrian?" When she emerged from the warehouse, the afternoon sun was sharp and merciless. She leaned against a rusted railing, the city skyline distant and indifferent. He hadn't lied to protect himself. He'd vanished to protect her from a truth still unfinished. The investigation that had defined her was now her undoing. She took a deep breath, glancing at the next unopened envelope in her pocket. On it, he had written only 4 words: "Don't trust Marcus Harlan." And just like that, the story turned again. By the time Elena reached the heart of the city, night had fallen again. The skyline glittered like an indifferent witness to her unraveling. She had spent years chasing a ghost. Now that ghost might be alive. Marcus Harlan, the man whose death had condemned Adrian, whose name had buried her career. Every step toward his address felt heavier than the last. When she arrived, the building was quiet. Too quiet. The door opened before she knocked. Marcus stood there, older, wearier, but alive. His eyes flicked over her face as though seeing the past walk back into his life. "I was wondering how long it would take you," he said, voice rough with guilt. Inside, the air smelled of paper and dust, like time refusing to move. Marcus poured whiskey into 2 glasses but didn't offer comfort. "Adrian told me you'd come," he said. "He always believed you'd forgive him." The words twisted in her chest. She wanted to demand answers, but his expression told her the truth was heavier than confession. He handed her an old photograph. Adrian, Marcus, and her, smiling outside a construction site years ago. "You were never supposed to see the letters," Marcus said quietly. "They were his insurance against me." The glass trembled in her hand. "Insurance for what?" she asked. "For the day I tried to kill him." The world tilted. Elena's voice came out as a whisper. "You tried to kill him?" Marcus's jaw clenched. "Not for money, for mercy." He reached into a drawer and slid out a faded file. Inside were hospital records, photographs, Adrian, gaunt and bruised, hooked to machines. He was dying, Marcus said. The scandal, the pressure, it broke him, but he wouldn't stop writing to you. He said if you still hated him, at least he'd die honest. Elena's throat tightened. Adrian hadn't vanished to hide guilt. He'd disappeared to save himself from a truth he thought she couldn't forgive. Marcus moved closer, his voice low. Adrian survived, but he made me promise no one would know. He said if the world thought he was dead, you'd finally be free of him. She turned toward him, eyes wet with disbelief. He wrote to me every night, she whispered. That doesn't sound like a man trying to let go. Marcus's gaze softened. He couldn't stop loving you, Elena. He just stopped believing he deserved to. The words sank like stones. In that moment, the anger that had fueled her for years began to crumble. What remained wasn't hatred. It was the unbearable truth of a love unfinished. She left Marcus' house at dawn, her mind spinning. The letters, the lies, the film, all fragments of a puzzle pointing to a single truth. Adrian was still alive. Her reflection in the passing taxi window looked like someone else entirely. Someone who had loved, lost, and was about to chase the ghost she swore to destroy. She pulled out her phone, dialing a number she hadn't used in years, the one still saved under his name. To her shock, it rang once. Then a voice, tired but unmistakably his, said, "Elena?" The world stopped moving. The voice on the other end was quiet, fractured by distance. "Elena," he said, as though the word itself hurt to speak. She couldn't breathe. "You're alive," she whispered. "You were never supposed to find me," he replied. For a moment, the silence between them was louder than the city. "You left me to protect a lie," she said. "No," Adrian murmured. "I left to protect you." The call ended before she could answer. Only static remained. In that static, she heard a faint sound. Waves. It wasn't the city. He was by the sea. She knew where. The villa on the cliffs. Their villa. And though her heart told her not to go, every part of her that still remembered love told her she had to. By dawn, she reached the cliffs. The sea stretched out endless and gray, the wind carrying the echo of a memory she had buried years ago. The villa sat perched against the horizon, the same white stone walls she once helped him restore. She stepped out of the car and felt the ocean air against her skin. Every breath burned with fear and longing. Somewhere beyond those doors was a man who had rewritten love in ink and silence. She approached slowly, knowing that the truth waiting inside might destroy what little was left of either of them. The door creaked open and the scent of cedar and salt water filled her lungs. Inside, time had stood still. The same photographs hung on the walls. The same books left half open. Then she saw him. Adrian stood by the window, thinner, older, but unmistakably him. His eyes, those same eyes that once held entire galaxies, met hers. Neither spoke. She took a step forward, and he flinched, as if the years between them had turned her into a ghost. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. "Then why did you write me 700 letters?" she asked. Silence. His shoulders dropped. "Because I couldn't stop talking to you even after you stopped listening." They sat across from each other at the same table where their story began. He poured tea with hands that trembled slightly, as though touching the past was a risk. "You made me believe you were dead," she said. "You let me hate you." Adrian stared at the cup between them. "I had to make you forget me. Marcus wasn't the villain. I was. I signed off on the deal that destroyed your career. I told him to bury it, to bury us, because I thought that was mercy." She shook her head, eyes glistening. "Mercy isn't lying. Mercy is staying." His voice broke, and I couldn't stay. Not when every truth I touched burned you. Evening fell without them noticing. The sky outside turned violet. the waves below striking rhythmically against the rocks. "So what now?" she asked. Adrian's gaze lifted from the letters stacked on the table. "Now you decide what to do with the truth," he said. "You came to expose me. Maybe you still should." She rose slowly, the weight of years settling in her chest. "I came here to find out who you really were. I think I already did." Her voice softened. "You were never the liar. You were the one who loved me too honestly to survive it." The villa was silent, save for the echo of waves outside. Elena sat alone at the desk, the 700 letters stacked before her like evidence of devotion. Every word he'd written now read like confession, love disguised as apology. She could destroy him with what she knew, or she could let the truth die here, with the man who once loved her too deeply to survive honesty. The phone on the table buzzed. Her editor. The same voice that had pushed her to ruin Adrian's empire years ago. "Elena, we've got a story," he said. "You disappeared last night. Did you find him?" She looked at Adrian sleeping in the chair by the window, bathed in moonlight. Her voice trembled. "Ice," she whispered. "I found him." But she didn't say what she would do next. Morning came soft and cruel. The sea shimmered like liquid glass. Adrian woke to find Elena already dressed, the recorder she once used for evidence now sitting between them. "You could destroy me with that," he said quietly. She met his gaze. "You destroyed me first." He looked down. "Then, maybe this is how we forgive each other." She took a deep breath, her thumb hovering over the recorder's play button. For a long moment, neither moved. Then she pressed it, not to record, but to erase. The tiny red light blinked once, then died. They walked along the cliffs after breakfast, the ocean wind cold and fierce. "You could have told me the truth," she said. "I tried." Adrian replied, "Every night on paper." "You just never opened the first one." She smiled sadly. "Maybe I wasn't ready to hear it." The wind tore at their coats, the sky bruised with gathering clouds. "So what happens now?" he asked. She looked toward the horizon. "Now, we start telling the truth, if only to ourselves." The sound of waves crashing below filled the silence between them, a language older than regret. Later, she found him in the study again, reading one of his own letters. "You wrote like a man waiting for a ghost," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "Maybe I was." She stepped closer, resting her hand on the paper. "You don't need to write anymore." He looked up. "And if I forget how to speak?" She met his eyes. "Then I'll remind you." Outside, thunder rumbled across the sea. Inside, the storm had finally quieted. That night, she stood by the sea alone. The wind carried the faint scent of rain, the same one that had marked their first and last goodbye. Behind her, she could hear Adrian's footsteps approaching. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. When his hand found hers, the silence was full of everything they could never say aloud. She turned to him, eyes glistening. "You wrote to me for 700 nights, she whispered. "Maybe now, it's my turn to write back." The world always finds its way back to those who try to hide from it. 2 days after the storm, Elena's phone began to buzz again. Calls from the newsroom, headlines she didn't write, stories she no longer controlled. Someone had leaked the truth. Adrian Vale was alive. She read the articles in silence. His empire's name returned to the headlines like a ghost refusing rest. He stood in the doorway, watching her read. "They know," she said. "I didn't tell them." His expression didn't change. Secrets have gravity. They fall eventually, outside. Reporters were already gathering near the gates. Inside, everything that they had rebuilt began to tremble. By afternoon, the villa was surrounded. Journalists shouted questions into the salt air. their cameras glinting like 100 tiny suns. Adrian stayed near the window, calm in a way that frightened her. "You can still walk away," he said. "Let me take the fall again." She shook her head. "No more lies, Adrian. Not even to protect me." For the first time, she saw him without his armor. The man, not the myth. "Then tell them everything," he said. "But tell them why." She nodded, though her heart trembled. This time, she wouldn't speak to destroy him. She would speak to finally set them both free. The press conference was streamed to millions. Elena stood at the podium, microphone trembling beneath her hands. She spoke not as a journalist, not as his accuser, but as the woman who had finally read every word he left behind. "Adrian Vale did lie," she said. "But not for profit, for protection, for love." A hush fell over the room. She told them about the letters, the illness, the disappearance. Every word stripped her raw, but she didn't stop. When it ended, she looked to the side of the stage. He was there, standing quietly, eyes fixed on her. No defense, no denial, just the weight of a truth too long buried. The story spread like wildfire. Some called it redemption, others manipulation. But for the first time, the truth belonged to them. That night, they returned to the villa, exhausted and quiet. Adrian sat by the fire, the flames painting his face in amber and red. "You saved me," he said softly. She smiled faintly. "No, you saved yourself. I just stopped running from the story." He looked at her the way he once had, like she was the only person who could ruin or resurrect him with a single word. "What happens now?" he asked. She reached for his hand. "Now, we live in the truth we built." The next morning, she woke to the sound of waves and the scent of sea air. The villa was quiet again, the world beyond their windows finally at a distance. She found him outside, barefoot on the terrace, the horizon stretching infinite before him. "They'll keep talking," she said softly. "Let them," he replied. "The only story that ever mattered is the one we finally finished." She stepped beside him, their shoulders brushing, the sun rising in gold over the water. For the first time in years, there was no need for proof. Only peace. Weeks passed quietly. The world moved on, as it always does, leaving their story behind like a wave that breaks and folds back into the sea. The villa became their refuge again, its silence filled not with secrets but with the ordinary sounds of life returning. The hum of the kettle, the creak of the old wooden stairs, the soft murmur of pages turning. One afternoon, as sunlight poured through the windows, Elena found a single letter tucked beneath the floorboard of the study desk. Its seal was different. Gold, not navy. Her hands shook as she broke it open. The date was the night before he disappeared. She unfolded the letter, the paper trembling between her fingers. It wasn't a confession or apology. It was a goodbye. "Elena," it began, "if you ever find this, it means I failed to disappear completely. I built an empire out of fear, and you saw through it. You always did. Every night I wrote to you was a way to stay alive, to remember what it meant to love someone who saw me not as power, but as man." Her throat tightened. "If I'm gone when you read this, promise me one thing. Don't let the story end with silence. Tell it the way it was. Not perfect, not pure, but real." That evening, she walked out to the cliffs with the letter in hand. Adrian followed, his steps soft against the stones. "You found it," he said quietly. She nodded. "Your last one." He looked out at the sea. "I never finished it. Maybe I didn't know how." She handed it to him. "Then, finish it now." He took a pen from his coat pocket, the same one he used for every letter, and wrote a single line at the bottom. "And she forgave me." When he looked up, his eyes were wet. She smiled, voice barely a whisper. "You're late, Vale," he smiled back. "I always was." They returned to the villa as night fell. He sealed the final letter and placed it in the safe. The same one she had opened on the night that began everything. "It belongs there," he said, "with the rest." She stood beside him, watching as the door clicked shut. 701, she murmured. "It's strange," he said softly. "I started writing to survive. Now I don't need to anymore." She looked up at him, eyes soft. "That's because you're finally living." Outside, the ocean murmured approval. The storm that had once defined them had given way to quiet tide. Morning came bright and weightless. The villa smelled of salt and tea. Elena stood on the balcony, sunlight on her face, the wind lifting her hair. Behind her, Adrian wrote, not letters this time, but something new. "What are you writing?" she asked. He smiled without looking up. "A story," he said, "about a woman who thought she could destroy a man but ended up saving him instead." She laughed softly. "Make sure she doesn't forgive him too easily." He met her gaze. "She won't. But she'll love him honestly." The camera of the world pulled back. Two figures framed in morning light, finally whole.